Hello, everyone, and welcome to the It Is What It Is podcast, episode 1. And today we're going to be talking about the problem of racism in schools. My name's Emil, and I'm lucky to be joined today by Jamamir and Tolu. And we're just going to be talking about our own experiences and our viewpoints and how, we can address this situation kind of in light of the George Floyd death and what we can do ourselves and those involved in the school arena to help deal with the greater problem of racism. So how is everyone? All good?
We're good. We're good. Say less.
Yeah.
We're good.
Good. All right, we'll get straight to it. So first thing I wanted to talk about today, guys, is this idea of unconscious bias. Now, it's something which is quite often involved in schools with teachers quite a lot, tending to favour, certain students. And I just wanted to pose this question, right? So do you guys think that our natural human behaviour leads us to kind of naturally be biased towards or against particular individuals based on their race? What do you guys kind of think about that sort of question?
Well, can I start off with saying another question sort of in relation to that? Do you think sometimes ethnic minorities, is this what you mean by that ethnic minorities are sometimes treated sometimes overly nicely, which can also be, not necessarily fair because you're literally picking them out because of how they look or whatever? Do you mean in that kind of sense?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think that's not just a case of staff members doing that. I think that's also a case of other pupils. In a lot of, obviously in a lot of schools you get just a couple of people of ethnic minorities, and sometimes they are treated overly nicely and sometimes given, certain benefits or picked out by members of staff and pupils.
Like positive discrimination.
Yeah, and sometimes that, that's fine, that's nice and that's needed, but sometimes that can also be really lonely and feel really horrible. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you think it's kind of... Yeah, go ahead, Toby.
So this is more of a problem that's brought up in homes as opposed to school, because obviously unconscious bias is developed from a very young age. So if you only hang around certain people and only see something on the TV that is a certain way. So let's say they depict black people as people who, I don't know, only live in Africa, and Africa is a country, not even a continent. Let's just call it as it is. Some people do think that. Mm-hmm. If people then see that as the way that black people are, they will definitely have some kind of bias towards how they should treat them. So they may actually end up treating them lower than they actually are, because of what they see and what they hear and who they hang around with. So it's more of an inbred situation and at home than at school. But then obviously at school, if you hang around with like-minded people, the views that you have become more enforced and stronger. So it's a bit of both, but I do think that the main issue is that it starts at home.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think that racism is, I don't know whether you guys saw that Instagram post, the idea that racism, you're not born racist, that you're taught to be racist in a sense. The video of, the black and the white kid, the toddlers running up to give each other a hug. And, that sort of thing just shows that our upbringing and the way that we're taught, particularly by our parents and those who we are surrounded by, makes a huge difference in terms of our psychological mindset, even if it's, not necessarily something that we're consciously aware of, just because of what we're exposed to, that can lead to, this idea of that unconscious part of our brain taking over, and those natural tendencies of bias towards particular individuals or particular members can almost overcome the logical side of thinking in terms of, the fair and the valid side of our brains, I think.
That's the case with And that's the case with so many things. And, you know, nearly how you often turn out as a person later in life is due to all these experiences that you have and little things that you pick up as a young kid and basically throughout the years when your brain is developing. And yeah, so obviously a big issue is, you know, what's taught by parents as you're growing up, but also talking to Tolio about this last night, but what could be embedded in a school curriculum from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in things like history classes and things, you know, we learn a lot about, you know, major events in history, of course, the Holocaust, you know, the world wars, whatever it is, but there is not enough done on, you know, whatever it is, Indian history, Black history, even, you know, Chinese history, whatever it is. But, you know, we could diversify that so much more and give younger kids an opportunity to learn about all these different areas, but also just become aware that there are different issues in the world. Not one is more important than the other.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like I agree, and like it's funny because when me and Jamva were talking about it, I then like thought about why we even study history, and like the truth is that like the reason why we study certain types of history is so that we have an appreciation for the current events that happen today. Because to be honest, without some of the stuff that happened in history, none of the stuff would be going on today. And so like when one really thinks about it, we do have to have an appreciation for how far we've come. But at the same time, we haven't really gone anywhere, if that makes sense. Because to be honest with you, living like 30 years ago, let's say like you're a black gay man, right? Living 30 years ago, you had like the worst lot of the crop. Like you were black, so you were definitely going to get judged because of the way you looked. And if you were gay, well, that's unfortunate because, I mean, you're going to get prejudiced if you come out and say that you're gay because you could end up getting killed for that, let alone being black as well. So like how far we've come is that you no longer would get killed for that in the street randomly, but you would definitely get judged by people in their mind. And it's the fact that people actually think that is a problem. And it's more the fact like how do we tackle that? How do we conquer that? Is more of the issue because, and as Jamvir was saying, like the Holocaust, we're taught about it so much that it's ingrained in our heads that the Holocaust was bad and it was wrong. And obviously that's true. It was bad and it was wrong. But how do we become like start educating people, diversifying the issues at hand? Like how do we start teaching people about other issues? Because it's not only the Holocaust that happened. That may have been one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century, but it wasn't the only thing that happened that was horrendously bad, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the way that, you know, exams are sat and the education system, particularly in the UK, I think it's kind of tailored towards, you know, kind of the main events. You look at the world wars which have taken place, there's a big focus on those things. And it's kind of more from a Western centralized specification, if you know what I mean. And I think to be able to expand that to, you know, cover all aspects of the world, whether it be Africa, Asia, you know, assessing all these different issues is something that I think is necessary. And it's necessary from a young age, not necessarily, you know, when you're sitting your GCSEs or whatever, but kind of in primary school level, if you can give that idea that, you know, there's a bigger picture, not just the Western world we live in. If you give that idea to kids, then naturally they'll probably be more likely to want to support one another because they have a greater understanding of their backgrounds, of their heritage, various issues, and ultimately, you know, they may be more sensitive to one another's past, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
It's kind of quite shocking if you think about it, but especially in a country like this, you know, even specifically London, which defines itself as, you know, like one of the most culturally diverse places on the planet. Like, you do kind of wonder how this hasn't been done already, like how schools in particular haven't been focusing on, you know, all these different things. Everyone highlights a lot of the issues the whole time, but no one really comes up with much of a solution. And often it's left to movements done solely by those ethnic minorities to get anywhere. And really, you know, that's never going to work, because the majority of people in an area might, you know, be white Brits. So how do you tackle that issue? You kind of need to get everyone on board with it, and that starts from a young age.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, like, you know, like you go on Instagram and you see a lot of people like obviously their hearts are in the right place, but if you don't have, you can have the heart, but if you're not going to do anything about it, what's the point? Like
Yeah,
you might as well
definitely.
not say anything in the first place. So it's not only our responsibility. Like I did an assembly for school, right? And before it, a teacher, he emailed me and he was like, oh, I wonder whether you can like give us any tips on how to help out with the Black Lives Matter movement. And to be honest with you, the one way apart from education that you can help is actually being a part of it yourself. Because like it's all well and good saying that, oh, you know, I'm going to support it, but I'm not actually going to get up with you and do the things that we need to do in order to solve the situation. Because like when you think about it, the way that the Holocaust became so well remembered and we say never again, never again, never again, it's because everybody resolved to actually make sure that never happens again. But with this situation, it's like, 80% of the world will say never again, but the other 20%, they're like, yeah, it's your problem, so I'm not going to do anything about it. But everyone needs to do something about it, because otherwise this is going to keep on going on and going on and going on. And that's due to institutionalized racism and unconscious bias, in my opinion. You know?
Yeah, I think you're definitely right there in terms of the social media aspect. I think it's all good and well, you know, saying you're in support of this, that, and the other, but it's about taking action when the right time is there. And, you know,
Yeah.
this is the right time. You can see there's support from all around the globe, people from all walks of life. And, you know, it's really good to see, you know, sometimes when you see some of those videos, you know, in America, you've seen some of those policemen, you know, going on the marches with the people. That sort of interaction is what you really want to see, that sort of togetherness and the support. But I don't know whether you've seen from those videos that actually what we can see, that it's difficult to kind of change people's mindset, because in those videos there's only been a handful, we're talking about here, only a handful of
Yeah.
cops or policemen who've supported, you know, the marches, the movements. And the reality is that the majority of those, you know, of the white cops, they've struggled to, you know, bring themselves to support it in a way. And that's something which is difficult to change, because obviously you have to realize that they're brought up in that own way. And by all means, you know, this process is something which will take time. And obviously we do have time. But at the end of the day, we are living in 2020, and it's had to get to the point of someone being killed completely unnecessarily to bring about this change. Surely, kind of as a human race, you know, we should think, why has it got to this point? Why has someone had to die for us to talk about these issues? Surely, you know, this is something that is unacceptable at the current time that we're living in. And it's something which we should be addressing, not just after someone's died, but every day, to, you know, spread that awareness, make people together, you know, ensure that everyone's on the same page. And I think that's something which is kind of concerning, that it's taken, you know, someone to die to get to this situation.
Yeah.
See, the thing is though, he's not the first black person to be killed in that way, or in any kind of way, you know. I mean, you had Stephen Lawrence, that sparked an uprising more like. You had Emmett Till way back in the 50s. You had so many people dying. I mean, Emmett Till had an open casket funeral, which was how the Black Lives Matter movement, or the Civil Rights movement, more like blew up in America. Like that's how, and it was things of such horrific nature that caused the uprising. But the problem is that you have a massive outbreak of uprising for like about a good few months, and then it dies down. Then next 5 years, the same thing happens. and it keeps on happening and happening. And whilst you see minimal progress, and it is minimal progress, you do end up realizing, like, why is this the case? Like, why can't we just get it over and done with once and for all? So I think the key now is to like come up with ways and a solution as to how we can actually get a proper definitive way to finish this. Because to be honest, I'm sick and tired of seeing the same kind of Black Lives Matter posts all over Instagram, all over social media, because it's just like, it's really painful every single time. And the more you see it, the more numb you become to the pain. And it's really, really frustrating, you know?
Mm-hmm. Similar to what, this is sort of just in response to Emil, but I guess to you as well, Tori, but people will bang on about, education and stuff. And of course, all these white cops who've done horrible things every single day, a lot of them are reported. Of course, there's George Floyd things blown up. And thankfully it's gone like crazy over social media and people are becoming more aware. But we can bang on about education and say, yeah, like when you're 17, 18, we should talk about these issues and stuff. But what we want to do now is we've got the laws saying that, yeah, got to be diverse, no like harm to, nothing like what we've done in history against ethnic minorities, and that's like legally that's not okay now. But we want to change people's mindsets, and that has to be done from an early age. We can go on about education as much as we want and say, those white cops shouldn't have done that, but they've grown up in an environment where that's been okay, and that hasn't been said, that that hasn't been put down as a negative thing to them. So we can blame them and we should blame them, but we should also blame their upbringing, and that's what we've really got to focus on. So I was just coming back to what we were speaking about before, but you've got to change people's mindsets to these kind of things, and that has to be done from an early age, because when you get to 17, 18, when you're an adult, your brain is fully developed. It's close to impossible to dramatically change your mindsets to really strong issues like this. So education, of course, is crucial, but it has to be done from when you're very young.
So what do you propose then? Do we just sit them down and like just force feed them information saying that this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong? What do we do? Because I mean, we can try that, but have you ever tried to teach like a 5-year-old kid about
but it's a lot. I think it's a lot more subtle than that. It's not. We don't learn things now. Like, of course, we learn some things by saying this is wrong, this is right. But a lot of things we learn are actually very subtle and from what we see around us. So there's got to be. There are a million ways to do this, and it's going to be very tough. And neither one is probably better than the other. But like we've spoken about before, embedding certain things into your history curriculum. Also, maybe more social interaction from a young age with more culturally diverse groups.
It's a good point you raise about kind of more cultural diversity with different groups, actually, because what I kind of found, coming up through primary school, and even we've seen it in senior school, despite the best interests of people and being with people of all different backgrounds in certain classes and school life, I think unfortunately the reality is that many people kind of clique together, kind of people from particular backgrounds. They tend to clique with one another of similar background, and what that can actually mean is that ultimately, if you're surrounded by necessarily people from the same kind of ethnic background, then you may not have the same kind of education and awareness of other people's point of view, and that can in a way just embed those issues of kind of this I think in all kind of backgrounds people have these ideas of different other kind of ethnic backgrounds, and that kind of subtle mindset that is kind of embedded within them is something which makes it even harder to do when you're surrounded by people kind of the same background, because you kind of think in a similar way and you can't expand your thinking.
Yeah.
Completely.
I just wanted to let you guys know about this thing. This is a stat which I saw actually from the government. So in England and Wales, this is a stat on hate crime. So hate crime regarding race. So in 2011 to 2012, there were 35,944 hate crimes committed due to race. And now in 2018 to 19, that has increased all the way up to 78,991 cases. Now, to me, that is a big issue because it shows that there's been a significant change in a small period of time, 10 years. The number of, hate crime cases has increased dramatically. And this is people of all backgrounds being affected. And the fact that this is getting picked up more, surely it shows that despite, the education we try and give these people, despite the campaigns, football had the racism campaign, kick it out. But despite these things, there's still a growing incidence of these cases, which is really alarming if you think about it. In 2020, we've still got this rapid increase in hate crime towards one another.
I mean, like, it should be surprising, but at the same time, considering what we've gone through in the past 20 years, I mean, it's not as surprising anymore. I mean, we had in 2001, we had so many terrible, just terrible things happening from people of different ethnicities. We had 9/11. We had the bombings, the London bombings underground in, was it 07?
2007.
Yeah, was it 07? Yeah, we've had so much random stuff just happen by people of color, and the worst part is that it's people of color. Guarantee you, if it wasn't people of color, it'd be a completely different story. I'm not. Would we even hear about it that much? Like, would we? This is the thing. Like,
that's a huge issue. Yeah. I think the way the media portrays, certain instances. Like, I'm pretty sure. I think Tolu, you put on your Insta the other day a post saying, if it's black on black, it's a gang war. If it's black on white, it's murder. If it's white on black, it's an accident. That sort of thing. If it's brown on white, it's a terrorist. That sort of thing is a big issue. The fact that people are immediately, if this is a psychological thing more than anything, that people immediately associate, whether they want to think about it or not, they have a tendency to relate a person's background to a particular idea. And that then links back to, this idea of systemic racism,
Exactly.
And ultimately, as human beings, I think we're responsible for calling people out on things like this. When ideas, about particular faith or religion are trivialized for entertainment purposes, what better are we to anyone else if we're being apathetic towards it and ignoring, the crimes that people are getting away with,
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly what I'm saying. Like, this is why I'm saying it should be surprising, but it can't be surprising because of the way media portrays stuff. I mean, like, ISIS, they've quietened down now, but like past 10 years, it was like literally every other month there was a terrorist attack, and it was by people of color, and it's a problem if it's by a person of color nowadays, because it's like oh, everyone's like that now, and it's not the case. It won't ever be the case that everyone's like that, because I mean, I'm pretty sure all of us here are good people, and the majority of people who will listen to this will be good people as well. And it's not everyone who acts like that or does stuff like that. And it's just the way that the media portrays it to be like it's everyone like that, you know. But we just got to hope for change, to be honest. And like, it's not only hope, we actually have to do something about it. And it's more of what we do rather than when we do it or how we do it. It's like, it's actually what we do, you know?
Yeah. Speaking about, you know, things that what we're trying to do, there's the letter written to the independent schools. I don't know whether our listeners saw that.
I wrote a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a part of it. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about that, Tolly?
Yeah, so like following the George Floyd incident, right? A girl from an old Habs girl called Tiwa, she was pretty much outraged at like everything that was going on, and she felt that she had to say something. So a WhatsApp group was conducted, and like loads of people from different private schools around the area and like around the country were added to it, and basically a letter was formed, basically saying that like, look, like, because we recognize, and this is the thing, all black people from independent schools will recognize that the main issue is not the fact, and this is what we're saying in the beginning, it's not the fact that people's mindsets can't be changed, but when people have been brought up in such a way and have been educated in such a way that all they hear about is basically glorification of white success in history, in I don't know, even subjects like maths and stuff like that, is if that's the only thing that you're learning, then there is no surprise that some of the stuff that we've experienced at school actually happens. And
Yes.
so like, I have my own personal stories, but people have had similar stories that are far worse than mine. And it's actually quite disgusting. So a letter was written, right, to all the independent schools. And there was a letter written to, I think, the Independent as well. And basically we were just like describing like how we actually feel in a time like this when this keeps on happening. And it's not like this is the first time. This is probably the millionth time that this has happened. And on this time, like, there's a massive outrage and like spark against this. So now's the best time to say anything, to be honest. But now that the letter's gone out and now that things are actually happening, people want to see more things happening. So we're all still going to push for it. We're all still going to strive for change, because change is the key here. We actually need change for things to actually be happening, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's about taking an active approach rather than a passive one. We've taken a passive approach, I think, for far too long, and it's time, you know, for people to just address things in an upfront manner, even in their day-to-day interactions with people. You know, if you hear someone making, you know, a snarky comment or something with, you know, clearly racist undertones, instead of just walking straight by it, pretending you didn't hear it, it's these sorts of things, the little things which we can do to influence the people around us by calling them out on these sorts of things, making them aware that what they're saying, frankly, is unacceptable in modern society.
And talking about these little comments and stuff, I was thinking about this last night actually, but I've worn a turban for the last 18 years, right? And being gone through school for my whole life, I've had, you know, so many little comments said to me, and often by mates, actually, comments by mates, which, yeah, I mean, if you say that to people that you don't know, it would be considered extremely offensive, and they are extremely offensive. But in a way, after hearing them for so long from mates, it kind of just becomes trivial. And I mean, I can admit myself, I'm not really proud of it, but I think it is a humane thing to do. That I've just become numb to it, and I don't even question it anymore. If someone comes up to me and will actively be racist to me, who's my mate, and they'll be laughing about it, you know, I won't even think twice about it, because that's just become such a normal thing for me. And I know for, you know, so many ethnic minority groups in schools, that is the case, and that is, you know, been the case with a lot of my mates as well. And I'm just wondering your kind of thoughts on that, because when you get into the real world, when you meet people, when you go to university, that stuff is, you can't get away with that anymore. But why are we getting away with that in schools? With this whole issue that as you're growing up, that's when you're developing all these thoughts. That's when you're creating your mindset for these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that that sort of thing is, unacceptable. I think the idea of being kind of immune to racism is something which, shouldn't be allowed. It's something which we shouldn't tolerate in any circumstance or situation, I think. I feel like when it comes to those areas, we need to be upfront with things. I know in the real world, people aren't as openly they don't openly make those comments, but they kind of, sometimes people think things like that. They have this prejudice or this preconception of a particular person, even having only met them for 5 minutes. And that's a big issue when you make a preconceived idea about someone. And the fact that, that's allowed in schools shouldn't be the case. People often say, oh, kids will be kids. But the reality is, if you let kids be kids, then you're letting them get away with things which in the real world are unacceptable. And that makes things more difficult for achieving change with areas such as racism,
Yeah. Like, like casual racism is like a big thing. Like,
Yeah,
when, like,
definitely.
not only in schools, like you'll see it, like, when I went to work placement, like I saw it a lot. Like you see it, and like one of the obstacles, like, about having like open conversations about race is that people tend to downplay things as like not really racist, especially when they joke about it. And what it does is it emboldens like prejudice. And like this is the thing, you don't need to subscribe to doctrines of like racial superiority to be able to say something to do with like racial implications, racist implications. And it's really easy. Like I could say something to someone, not really have the intent, but the impact will be there if it's the wrong thing, if that makes sense. And the problem is that casual racism is probably one of the worst things that can turn into a hate crime, because it has such a big impact on people. Like, you can't forget about those who are on the receiving end of that kind of racism and discrimination.
Exactly.
And
It's difficult to deal with.
exactly, it's harmful, because it's like it's supposed to be a joke in some cases. Casual racism is supposed to be a joke. Like, you see all these stand-up comedians making like racist jokes about their own race, obviously not about other people's races most of the time anyway. And like, it's harmful if someone else of a different race says it, which is why we don't really, there's not really a line here. It's really blurred, and like, it's difficult to discuss, in my opinion. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually similar to that. I mean, this is a really tricky issue that I'm about to talk about. But it's more like, often people of a certain race will speak very freely and often say things which you cannot say if you are of another race, and that would be seen as very racist. But they'll say it very openly in front of people from all races, and then naturally people pick those kind of things up. And I don't know, maybe because I said something about Sikhs, then anyone else can say that. So that's also an issue. And like, I don't know, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, because I would say that I can speak like much more freely, and it's more socially acceptable for me to do so about Sikhs and wearing turbans and things. And I'd be quite shocked if I heard those kind of things said from other people. But is it really then fair for me to go and trivialize that in front of those other people, when really they're not, allowed to say those kind of things?
Yeah, exactly. I think people like, you have your comedians, you have your people, celebrities, sometimes they portray things in a manner which seem light-hearted and, you know, insignificant in a way. But I think the way that they portray things sometimes is, you know, they kind of gloss over the issues, right? They'll make a joke about particular race or person's upbringing or things, but that kind of entertainment, that kind of social media which we're exposed to, that only develops these subconscious stereotypes in our minds. And ultimately, when we have these stereotypes in our minds, it can kind of lead to, you know, subtle inclinations to act in a slightly racist manner, just from our day-to-day interactions, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true, you know, and so like Jamv is saying how he's Sikh and everything, and what recently just happened was it was the anniversary of something terrible that happened in 1984, right? Where many, like thousands of Sikhs were brutally murdered, right? In India, and it kind of begs the question, right? It's like, it's all like when you remember these things. So I just found out about it because a friend of mine sent me something on this issue, and I was like, whoa, you know. And it's not the realization that there are other issues that are as big or as prevalent as the stuff that, you know, we're seeing right now, but it's just the fact that how can something, and this is what happens, something becomes belittled, so then people think it's okay to gloss over it, and this was glossed over massively by so many people, so much so that I had no idea this even happened, you know. And that might be due to my own like ignorance, or that might be due to the fact that we just never get told about these things, you know. And it's more like, and this is the same thing with casual racism. It's like when you gloss over something and you think it's okay, so you just move on, it's where the problem begins, and that's where the impact like starts. That's where the impact starts developing. And you might be unaware of it. Even on the receiving end, you might be unaware of it. But when you hear something like that, and you kind of just discard it and throw it away, that's where it becomes a problem, you know. And it's like why? What's the point of even fighting for your rights if you can't even stand up to something when you know it's wrong, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to give, you know, kind of like a couple of examples from schooling. I think one example which I remember, I don't know whether you guys remember this, but remember when we used to play football at lunchtime? And actually, you know, one time I remember we used to have kind of like Jews versus, you know, the Asians or the rest. And that sort of behavior simply just makes the issue worse, I think. It basically means that, you know, things are different, and it makes people think that, you know, these sorts of things are acceptable. And another kind of thing which I remember from school is kind of around year 7 or year 8. I remember kind of, you know, on the WhatsApp groups and those things, you'd always kind of see these videos, you know, portraying terrorists, for example, you know, and things like Allahu Akbar and things like that all the time, you know, kind of putting those things, glossing over those sorts of, you know, things by make it seem trivial in a way. And by making those things seem trivial from that age, it's ultimately meant that people have kind of ignored them and they brush those issues to the side, when really we should be upfront about it and address it head on, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, what more can we say, really? Like, that's kind of hit the nail on the head. It's just, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I would say is that for me, I think it's not enough to be just against racism. I think as individuals and as a collective, we need to be anti-racist. You know, now people, our listeners may wonder, you know, what does being anti-racist entail? Well, to me, being anti-racist entails actively calling people out, whether that be teachers or students, on even the little things, those remarks or comments which are subtly racist, which people would otherwise ignore. I think it also entails education, the process of actively keeping up to date and educating yourself and learning about the issues surrounding racism and how you can do your part to support the movements and how to address the racism which is going on. I think being anti-racist is fundamental to having change. I think being actively involved, not just taking the back seat, so to speak, being upfront and getting straight to the point and calling people out, I think.
Of course. I mean, I'll say one thing on anti-racism before I think we like come to a close. Yeah, it's that, and this is just general in life about any kind of movement that is to better society, right? If you're neutral or you are passive in a situation, I don't care who you are, you are collaborating with whatever is going on. That's bad. So if and this is the thing, and this is the problem. This is basically what the documentary 13th basically discusses, right? And it's that people were silent and they knew what was going around them was wrong, right? Like you see how slavery develops in America. From slavery goes to convict leasing, then goes to Jim Crow laws, which I severely hate, and then that leads into mass incarceration, right? And that's because people didn't stand up with other people for what was right when they clearly knew what was right. I'm gonna come back to Emmett Till again because there's something, it leads directly into this, and this is how it actually blew up in America, right? This kid just looked at a white woman. He didn't even say anything. He just looked at her, just like the same way I would look at you, the same way that I would look at someone on the street, or just casual look, right? Nothing intentional, right? Like that at all. The white woman goes and tells some white man, "Oh, look, this boy did stuff to me." Is looking and doing stuff to you completely different? And when I say doing stuff, I mean touching inappropriately. It's completely different. And at that time, if a black boy were to ever do that, it is basically a death sentence for you. So why would he do? And it's just this kind of thing. And people around there were witnesses, and they did nothing. This kid got lynched. He got lynched. Physically, he was completely paralyzed. His face was so swollen, he couldn't see, and he died from his injuries, And it's just stuff like that. Like, this is the problem if you're quiet in situations like this, because you contribute to the problem because you're not actually standing up for what's right. And it's like, what's the point of us even doing something if you're not going to back us, And it's just those who observe these kind of things, that you're passive anti-racist, if that makes sense. And a passive anti-racist is no better than an actual racist. If you're an active anti-racist, you're actually doing something to help the problem. To help the cause.
Yeah.
And you're stirring away from the problem. And we need more anti-racists in our society, in my opinion. But that's all I have to say to this,
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap it up, guys. I hope you guys have taken away. I think what Tolu said right at the end there is one of the fundamental points. It's not good enough to be a passive anti-racist. What you need to do, if you really want to make a difference, is be active in supporting these movements, educating yourself to deal with these issues. And if you do that, then ultimately we have an opportunity at this moment in time to make a significant change in the way people perceive each other and racism in society. So we're going to wrap it up there, guys. I'd say thank you to Tolu and Jamile for joining us for what was a very thought-provoking discussion. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below if you agree with what our points are. If you have any questions, what your viewpoints are. We'd love to hear from you guys. and join us next week where we're going to be discussing in a slightly different topic. We're going to be discussing the return of sport and how, you know, that's going to affect us. And rumour has it we could have a special guest joining us next week. So we'll catch you guys for the next one. I'm out. Tolu, you want to say goodbye?
I'm out here. I'm out of here.
All right.
Goodbye. It is what it is.
It is what it is. Have a good one, everyone.